Was Samson justified in telling Delilah lies? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Judges on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Judges 16 verses 1 to 9, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Judges 16 verse 1, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Judges chapter 16, beginning at verse 1. Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there and went in to her. When the Gazites were told, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. They were quiet all night, saying, "In the morning, when it is daylight, we will kill him." And Samson lay low till midnight. Then he arose at midnight, took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two gateposts, pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Afterward, it happened that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Entice him and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies, and with what you may be bound to afflict you." And Samson said to her, "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, then I shall become weak, and be like any other man." So the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, and she bound him with them. Now men were lying in wait, staying with her in the room. And she said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." But he broke the bowstrings as a strand of yarn breaks when it touches fire. So the secret of his strength was not known. Over the last 7 lessons, we've been looking at the judge named Samson. We've seen Samson to be a flawed man, in that he was a Nazirite who didn't keep the Nazirite vows he should have. He was an arrogant man and a somewhat covetous man, which is the reason he told the riddle at his wedding, which led to a chain of events that concluded with his wife being killed and he being captured before being delivered by God. And he was a man who was easily enticed by and manipulated by women, a weakness we'll see here in chapter 16 too. But even though Samson was a flawed man, he was also a faithful man in that he trusted in God to be able to do what only God could do, deliver the Israelites from the oppression of the Philistines. God had revealed to Samson his role as judge in this regard, and so Samson had faith in God that he would be able to accomplish what God had set out for him to do. Now this, of course, doesn't excuse Samson's sins, but God can forgive those sins if one is repentant, something that I believe Samson was, and also something we'll see especially towards the end of this chapter. At the end of chapter 15, the writer of Judges says that Samson judged Israel for 20 years. This might make it seem like the story of Samson is over, and for the most part it is. But chapter 16 will detail to us the downfall of Samson, which led to his death, events that didn't take too long to unfold. Assuming that Samson began judging Israel in about 1098 BC, this brings our timeline down to about 1078 BC. Chapter 16 begins with Samson spending the night with a harlot in Gaza. As we said earlier, Samson was a man who was easily enticed by women and a man who seemingly couldn't control his sexual urges. That is why Paul in 1 Corinthians 7 said that it is better for a person to marry if they are constantly lusting after another, which would lead them to go after fornication. For fornication is sin. It is sin for Samson here too, but told to us as an introduction to the story. For when the men of Gaza had heard that he was here with a harlot, they surrounded the city, wanting to take Samson by surprise the next morning and kill him. But for whatever reason, Samson knew what was going on, and around midnight got up from sleep, tore off the door and doorposts of the gate of the city, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that faced Hebron. Now the city of Hebron is about 61 kilometers or 38 miles from Gaza itself, with an elevation rise of about 3,200 feet or 1,000 meters, and while some conclude that Samson took the gates there, that is not a necessary conclusion from the text. All that is said is that he took them to the top of the hill facing Hebron. So wherever the hill was, It faced the direction of Hebron. Whether Samson took the gates of the city to Hebron itself or only to a nearby hill, the fact remains Samson, by his own strength, did not accomplish this. We know that it was the Lord who provided him this strength, and the Philistines, however, didn't know this. Now, it is almost certainly true that they thought it must have some supernatural source, but that supernatural source to them must be acting through a physical means. The question is how to find out the source of Samson's strength, remove that source, and defeat Samson. And lo and behold, Samson's weakness surrounding women would be his downfall. For Samson fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek named Delilah. The valley of Sorek is the main valley next to Samson's hometown of Zorah. Thus the valley lay on the border between the tribes of Dan and Judah. When the lords of the Philistines learned of this, they conspired with Delilah to entice Samson and learn the source of his strength. If she did this, she would receive a large sum of money. And so that enticed her, and she agreed. She went into Samson and asked him where his strength lied, and with what he could be bound, so that he could be afflicted. Now that this woman came in and asked him this question should have raised alarm bells. Why did she want to know the source of his strength? What was it to her? But no, Delilah enticed Samson, and so Samson said that if he was bound with 7 fresh bowstrings not yet dried, that he would become weak like any other man. This was, of course, a lie, for when the Philistines tried this, he broke the bowstrings like yarn breaks when it touches fire, and the Philistines were defeated. The question is, was Samson justified in lying to Delilah? The answer to that is no. Lying, no matter the situation, is never condoned in Scripture, even if good results come from that lie. Samson could have told Delilah that I am not going to tell you. Samson, with his strength, could have protected Delilah from the harm should she come into harm because of the Philistines threatening her, like they did his wife back in chapter 14. But Samson, at least at this point, likely saw this as an opportunity to defeat more Philistines, so he lied. But Delilah wasn't going to take this lying down. She was going to persist. Would Samson be able to withstand her? Or will his weakness towards women be his undoing? We'll find out, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Judges 16, verses 10 to 22, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.